Welcome, everyone. Today is going to be the second lecture in a series on parenting. Last week was the first, and this lecture is dedicated for Refuah Shlema, all those among us that need healing, as well as tonight is my mother's Yortzeit anniversary of her passing. Ileilu Nishmat Zilpazina Bat Rachel. Today, the topic is setting limits and disciplining your children. We mentioned last week that the main prime goal of parenting is to raise a good human being, to raise somebody who will be a benefit to the society, who will make a world a better place, and chas v'shalom, not to damage the world. And that is for everyone, Jew or non-Jew. But we as Jews have an additional goal in mind. When we raise our children, in addition them becoming good members of society, we want them also to become servants of Hashem. And therefore, we need to give them proper tools and proper education for them to be able to accomplish these two great goals, to benefit humankind and to serve Hashem. Last week, we mentioned the two most important elements in parenting, and that is not being overprotective and not overindulging your children. And this week, today, we will learn about the third very important element in this process, and that is disciplining the child and setting rules and limitations and following through with them. But before we proceed, I would like to preface it with a few important points. And even before the introduction, I would like to recommend two books that I feel are on top of the list of expecting parents or parents that are dealing with children already. One of these books is called Planting and Building. I'm going to show you so that you know what I'm talking about. It's a very thin book in English called Planting and Building by Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. A lot of what you find being taught to young parents today is taken from this book, as well as an expansion of that book, originally written in Hebrew, and now just this year translated into English, is this following book called Spare the Child. I'm going to show it again. And the author is Rabbi Yechiel Yaakovson. Spare the Child, Essentials of Torah Chinuch. Now, this book is much thicker. It's more advanced, difficult to read, so it would require patience and perhaps learning it together with your spouse, and maybe even organizing a group, learning with a partner, or maybe even with a rabbi. These two books also form the foundation of today's lesson. Now, the first point that I want to preface this lesson with is that it is forbidden to demand of a child things that, because of his limited maturity, he is not yet capable of understanding or doing. Such demands can actually damage the child. When we hear the word discipline, we might think that the parent is the king or a policeman, and he demands of the child whatever he wants, and the child must fulfill the demand. That may have been the attitude of certain cultures and certain parents, and they actually said that if the father said something, you must do, even if you can't. If the mother said something, you must do, even if you don't know how. And of course, we understand that is very damaging. That puts the child down, that discourages the child, breaks him. And of course, it causes a lot of unnecessary punishment, because if the child does not understand what you're asking from him, or he is not capable of doing it, he will fail and he will feel incapable. And then the parent, such a demanding parent, will get angry and scream or even punish the child. For example, do not ask a child, unless you have enough patience and you don't care what happens, do not ask a young child to pour a drink from a heavy pitcher. Because if he does and he spills the cup or breaks the pitcher, you will be upset and he will be discouraged. Or don't ask a young child to clear the table, to bring dishes from the table to the kitchen, if you suspect that he might drop them. And we're not talking about him dropping on purpose. We're talking about that he's very young, his hands are shaky. As he walks, even by himself, he might fall, and all the more so with heavy dishes that are blocking his view. So be careful not to demand from your child more than he can successfully do. And the opposite, a parent should ask the child things that he knows the child will most likely be happy to do and do them successfully. Another example, people might demand their children to sit at the Shabbat table throughout the meal. And the meal might take an hour, 2 hours, or sometimes even longer. And they demand that the children should sit quietly, pay attention, not talk, and not complain. This is something that is not possible for a child. And we are demanding something that's beyond his ability. It is okay if children sit at the meal for only part of it, for 15, 20 minutes, depending on the age, and then you should allow them to go and play, to read a book, to relax on a couch. They should not be pressured according to their ability, the amount that they are used to, that you can demand, to follow the manners of the etiquette of the table and to sit quietly during kiddush or hamotzi. But once they ate and they're satisfied, and they need very little to be satisfied, and they have no interest in sitting by the table and they have no ability to sit by the table, it would be foolish to demand something that they are not capable. And another common example, many parents call me and ask, Rabbi, my child is already such and such age and he's still wearing diapers. Should we force him out of diapers? And experience shows that if we force a child out of diapers too early, it can actually damage his development. The time will come when the child himself will want to be trained, and then the process will proceed much more harmoniously. It is true that in Russia, children were trained from 8 months old to go to the bathroom without diapers. And I remember myself being trained in the nursery. I don't remember my age. And successfully, but for some children, it's too much. Don't say that since my parents trained me when I was such an age, I will train my child also at such an age, because every child is different. If you see your child is understanding, you can demand. But if not, if you see he failed and forgot and he doesn't understand, then wait another few months. It's not a big deal. And by the way, there is a general rule in parenting when to correct a child, when to rebuke a child, and when to ignore it. And the rule is, if this behavior is likely to continue when the child grows up, then you should try to influence the child to stop this behavior, because there is a danger. If you don't, the child will continue doing this when he grows up. For example, if the child is lying, if you don't stop and don't call him on it, he will get used to it, and he'll think that he'll always get away with it, and he'll continue lying and get better and better at it. So lying has to be stopped right away. Or if a child is stealing, this is also something that has to be stopped. Or if the child is hitting his sibling or his parents, chas v'shalom, that is also a forbidden behavior that has to be stopped. If a child is hitting a parent, that cannot be tolerated. However, let's say a child is sinning and he put his foot on the table. So such a behavior, a parent has to say to himself, is inappropriate, and I can gently remind that this is a table and no more. But I don't have to worry that when my child grows up and he goes to his parents-in-law to meet them for the first time after a shidduch, he's going to put his feet on the table. I don't have to worry about it. Not only that, if the child has any other behavior that I feel is inappropriate, but I have to ask myself, is it childish behavior? And as such, as soon as he becomes older, he is going to outgrow it and stop doing it himself. So then what's the point in telling it to him, demanding it, rebuking him for it, when it's going to happen by itself? Don't fight a battle that is not necessary. So always ask yourself this question: is this a behavior that I must stop? Because if not, it will only get worse and he'll get used to it and continue doing it when he is adult. Or when he is adult, he himself will be embarrassed of such a thing, or he himself will understand and he's going to stop. And therefore, any mistake that a child does that is only age appropriate, you can ignore. If he is walking with a cup and he trips and spills, or his hand shakes and some of the drink spills, or he's pouring a drink and the cup falls down, or he's eating his cereal and some of it spills on his clothing, such behavior can be ignored, because when he grows up, he will not do it by himself. This is a general rule in parenting, to limit the rebuke and to limit unnecessary put downs when if you know they will pass by themselves. That's point number one. Don't ask from a child more than he understands or more than he is capable of doing. Now, point number two, as a preface to our class: in order to grow up successfully and pass the teenage years peacefully, the child needs to have warm relationship with his parents. He has to feel that his mother loves him, and he has to feel that his father loves him, because teenage years are very dangerous. They're difficult because of the hormones, because of the newly found strengths and desires, and because of outside influences. And if the child does not feel that his parents love him, he does not feel warmth in the house, he will feel too much risk to ask for help. He will not share with his parents. And if parents put what he feels is too much pressure on him, because there is no warmth, he will snap and he will rebel. But as long as there is warm relationship, as long as he knows my father loves me, my mother loves me, later in life, when you will need to apply more pressure, when you will have to set more strict rules for his own benefit, you will be able to afford to do it because you have that warmth between you. So therefore, we have to keep that in mind. And even if we want to put more pressure on our 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old right now and demand from them and apply harsh measures, we should not do it. If we see that the educational system that we have to adapt to demand what we want will cause us to lose that warmth, then it's not worth it. Because whatever bad things they're doing now, the potential for doing bad is much worse when they're adolescents. And therefore, we should save that warm relationship for later. Don't ruin it at young age. Whatever they may rebel and do at a young age is going to be much worse later. So choose your battles. Make sure no matter what discipline you use and no matter what punishments you choose, there must be this feeling that my father loves me and my mother loves me. The third point in this introduction is that it's impossible to be a good parent unless you work on your character traits, on your midot. You cannot educate or teach others if you are showing bad example. You cannot demand of children to be considerate of others if you are not considerate of them or of your spouse. You cannot demand them not to be lazy if you're showing them that you're lazy. You cannot demand of them not to get angry if they see that you get angry. You cannot demand them to not to raise their voice if they see that you raise your voice. Basically, if a person does not work on himself, he cannot be an educator. And therefore, if you know that you have bad character traits and you don't want to work on yourself, so leave educating your child for the school or for the neighbors, or hire an educator to educate your children. Because by demanding from them what you yourself are not doing, by showing bad example, being a hypocrite, you will only damage the child. He will rebel, and you will create tension in the house. And this brings us to the last point in this introduction. Point number 4 is that often when we hear the word discipline, we think of spanking, we think of cruelty, we think of screaming. And that is not what we mean by discipline and by setting rules and limitations. We have to understand right away that discipline is not the same as harsh measures like hitting, screaming at the child, threatening him, putting fear on him. That is not discipline. That just shows weakness of character in parents, that they get angry, that they're insecure, that they have low self-esteem. A parent that is confident, will speak calmly, even though he demands. He will not hit, he will not scream. And that is what we're trying to learn today. How to discipline without hitting, without screaming or raising voice, and without applying harsh punishments upon the child. Of course, if there is an emergency, or once in a while where a parent fails to control themselves, but again, it's once in a while, he just breaks and spanks a child, that's forgivable. If a mother is so tired and stressed, and she loses it and she screams, once in a while, that's okay. But to incorporate it as your method of disciplining the child, to put in spanking or screaming or threats and fear into your discipline, that is unacceptable. So with this, let's begin. And just one more point: don't expect to learn all the tools of discipline and parenting in one class. This is an introduction to give you some points and examples. It requires more elaboration, as well as other topics that need to be covered. And for that, we can have more sessions, or it's important to acquire a book and learn it together with your spouse, or to sign up for a course, or to buy a series of lectures and listen to them, take notes, and practice them little by little until you become proficient in them. So let's try to explain briefly what does it mean, proper discipline, and how to set limits and follow through with them. The most important thing in discipline is for a parent to understand that he is a parent. He is not a friend of a child, and he is not the servant of the child. The parent has to understand that he is the parent. That means that Hashem created you some 20 years or 30 years before your child. And he decided that according to your abilities and according to your neshama, your spiritual being, you are capable to raise this or these children. And he gave them to you. And Hashem put his trust in you as an adult in the family to raise your children properly. Therefore, each parent must believe in himself, in his parental abilities, and when they are speaking to their child, when they are making demands of the child, they have to understand that they are the authority in the house. God gave them the power to set the rules. And no child should be able to scare a parent. No child should be able to win a parent in their arguments. The parent must trust themselves and in their rules. And therefore, the rules that a parent sets are like rules set in stone. And if you decide to make a rule, and try not to make too many rules in your house, not to make life miserable for your children, but whatever rules you do make, you have to demand adherence to them. Because if you make rules and you don't enforce them, then it's better not to make the rules in the first place. So you have to know your abilities and only make a rule if it's important for you. And then take it upon yourself to follow through no matter what. If the child will cry, if the child will whine, if the child will fall on the floor and pretend he's dying, if the child will bother you again and again to relax the rule, you cannot give in. Because if with your clear mind you decided together with your spouse that a certain rule is important, and you felt that it's important enough to announce it in your family, it must be important enough to keep. And therefore, even if you're tired, even if they're bothering you with their constant demands, pestering, you cannot give in. If you want, you can say, I see how difficult it is for me, and next time I'm going to change the rule. And I'm going to announce that from now on, rules are different. You have the right to change the rules. That's fine. But once the rule is set, you cannot give in, because the children are testing their parents. Children want to know, are my parents serious? Are they for real? There is power struggle. My parents set the rule, but let's see if I can trick them, or let's see if I can win against them, because I see they're tired. I see they're busy. Let me bother them until they will give in. Whether it is a candy, whether it is extra portion of dessert, whether it is to go play with a friend outside, or to ask for keys of your car, whatever it is, if there is a rule, the number one rule is that you as a parent have to keep that rule, enforce that rule. Otherwise, your authority in their eyes will fall, and it will only make it harder for you in the future. If you give in once, even if you feel that this thing that you demanded, now you look at it again and you say, it's not so important, let me give in. You cannot give in anymore, because by giving in, you are undermining your authority. And therefore, before making the rule, think hard with your spouse. Is this rule worth making? And if it is an important rule, you have the right to make that rule. But you have to decide together with your spouse and support each other that we are going to stick to this rule no matter what. If the child will gag, if they will pretend that they are suffocating, if they will cry and cry and cry, don't give in. These are tactics of all children, and no child died yet from demanding from their parents to give them ice cream. That's very important rule number one. Make few demands, but the demands you make, you yourself have to enforce and keep yourself. Now, what do you do if you made rules and children don't keep the rules? So here, there has to be what we call a consequence. It's not a punishment, because punishment is usually out of proportion. Punishment is usually done out of anger. And most of the time, the parent regrets the punishment that they gave, because it really was done with anger. And the child feels that they were mistreated. Rather, we speak of consequences. Consequence means that the child knows in advance what will happen if he doesn't follow the rules. And you should try to design the consequence as a direct outcome of their own action. And here there is a trick. Our sages say that we should make our Yetzer Hara work for us. Not only we should employ the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, but even the evil inclination should work for us. So as an example, let's take a demand, a rule. For example, the parent says, you need to clean the room from toys. And if you don't, you're not getting dessert. So that is considered improper demand, an improper consequence. Why? Because you are pitting your child's Yetzer Hara against you. You're telling him, do this, and he doesn't want to do it. And you're telling him you're going to lose dessert, and that makes him angry. And now it's your ego against his ego. She says, I don't want to do it, and my parents are forcing me. And they're telling me I'm going to lose dessert. I'm going to show them that I don't care about the dessert. And he chooses not to do it. And he becomes angry, and because of his anger, he forgets about the dessert, and he says, I don't care. And you become angry, and you say, no, I told you you have to do it, and if you don't do it, I'm going to not only not give you dessert, I'm going to even give you more punishment. And you increase the punishment, and he still refuses, because again, it's a battle. What is the proper way to do it? The proper way is to make his Yetzer Hara work for you, become your employee. How do you do that? How do you cause child's bad inclination to work for you? And that is first by telling the child, my dear son or my dear daughter, we are going to have dessert soon, or we're going to have snacks soon. I would like to give it to you. And right away, he gets excited. He says, yes, I like that. And you say, as soon as the room is clean, we're going to have dessert. Now, you did not tell him, you must do it. And he says, I don't want. You said it to him, I want to give you something nice. And there is a procedure to get to that nice. The way to get to that something you desire is to clean the room. And now his Yetzer Hara says, okay, if I clean the room, I'm going to get my dessert faster. If I prolong it, it's going to take longer. So the Yetzer Hara says, come on, get on with it. Let's start cleaning the room. And the child, using his good inclination and his evil inclination, now is eagerly going to clean up the room as fast as he can, because instead of getting the dessert as usually the procedure at the end of the meal in half an hour, you can tell the child, if you finish cleaning the room and you ate your main course, I can give you dessert right now. You don't have to wait until the adults eat the dessert. So now you are encouraging him to work for you, and he thinks he's working for himself, but he's really working for you. That's called utilizing his evil inclination for your work. So this is an example of setting a consequence which is a direct outcome of his not listening. You tell him the dessert is an outcome of the clean room. If you clean the room, you'll get dessert, and even earlier. And if not, we'll wait until the room is clean. And if the room is not clean by a certain time, the time for dessert passes. That's it. It's over. Now, at this point, a parent has to be willing to do the job himself. And let me explain what I mean. If you tell a child to do something, as a free human being, as an independent individual, he has the right to refuse. He can choose to suffer the consequence and not to do it. That's his right, and that's okay. The goal of these consequences is that eventually the child will tell himself, it's not worth it for me not to listen to my parents. The parent doesn't have to scream, the parent doesn't have to yell and hit, because education is not a short-term goal. It's not about me telling the child what to do and the child listening, and if the child doesn't listen, I'm going to beat him until he listens. No, that's not education. Education is long-term, to give the child a feeling that it's good to listen to parents. And we do it by encouragement, by rewards, and we're going to learn how to reward in a different class. What kind of reward is good and what kind of reward is not good. And we educate by consequences. And again, these consequences in themselves carry a message. The message being that if I listen to parents, it will be good for me. If I don't listen to parents, it's not going to be good for me. So it's for my own sake, it's good to listen to parents. Now, what I mean by the parent has to be willing to do the job that we demand of our children if they choose not to do it. Since education is a long-term goal, and we cannot force the child physically by hitting or yelling at him to do what we want, but rather by giving consequences, and consequences are in the future, we have to be willing to do the job ourselves, because if the child chooses not to do it, the job is left undone. And if the job is left undone, it will make the parent stressed. And it will make the parent try to force the child, make additional demands. Basically, the rule is that it's one demand and one consequence per job. So in this example, you ask the child to clean the room and you give appropriate consequence, that I want to give you dessert, and I can give you the dessert or the snack earlier than the schedule. But first, the room needs to be cleaned. If the child says, no, I don't want to clean the room, and he runs out to play, okay? He lost dessert, the room is not cleaned. Now you have to be willing to clean the room yourself. Now the child comes back and he says, okay, you know what? Give me dessert. I'll clean the room. And you say, too late. I cleaned the room already. This is important, as I said, that the parents should not get frustrated that the room is still not clean and my child is not listening. Go and clean the room yourself. The consequence you already gave. The lesson the child will learn. And an additional lesson he'll learn when he comes back. And now he wants to clean the room according to his own demands. I will clean the room when I want. And now I came and now I want to clean the room. Let me clean the room. It's too late. The second lesson that you teach him is you have to listen to your parents from the first time. And when they tell you to do something, not when you want to do it. So you should ask your children things that they have ability to refuse, and you're okay if they refuse it. Now, somebody asked an important question. What if they want to do homework? If you want them to do homework and they don't want to do homework. So this is an excellent question, an excellent example. Your child goes to school and you want him to do well. You want him to understand and graduate to the next year. And you stress out and you demand and you scream and you play policeman. So what happens is that in this situation, you made his job your job. Really, it's the job of the child to go to school, to listen, to follow, to pay attention, and to come home and do the homework. And all you need to do is provide encouragement for the child to explain to him why it is his job, meaning why he needs to do homework. And you can give the consequence, either the ultimate consequence that may encourage him, that if you don't pass this grade, you will have to repeat it. And I'm not running after you to do your homework. If you will have to leave your classmates and go to the lower class, I'm fine with it. I'm not going to beg your teachers and your principal to advance you. No, if you don't care, I also don't care. If you don't want to do your homework, it's your problem. But there's going to be a consequence. You might stay and repeat the grade. That's the long-term consequence. As well as you can tell them that if they don't do well, they will not be able to get a good job, they will not be able to get married, and things like that. Just not threatening, but just explaining to them how the system works. And short-term consequences you can give them. For example, you can say, there is a certain amount of time that you can spend with computer games, phone, other things. Although I don't encourage you to allow your children to watch TV, internet, computer games, or to have a phone, not at all. But if you choose to give it to your children, so then you can use it as your helper. You can say, every child in our family can have, let's say, half an hour of watching, half an hour of playing, half an hour of this or that. But first, the homework has to be done. And that's it. If he chooses not to do homework and instead just sit and do nothing, it's not your problem, it's his problem. Because now he will not be able to play his favorite game. He might not be able to go outside. He might not be able to have his snack or dessert. But it should not be your job. And it's okay if they don't do homework once or twice or three times or even multiple times, as long as you provided consequence that you feel matter for them. And that's a rule for consequence. The consequence has to be something that they value, something that they want. As I said, that their Yetzer Hara should work for you, that their evil inclination should desire that consequence and should help them to do their hard work. They don't want to do their homework. They don't want to do chores at home. So we have to help them. We have to encourage them by giving them sort of a reward. And this consequence can serve as a double, as a reward and as a punishment. That's what we call a consequence, that it's a direct outcome of your actions. If you do your homework, you will get these benefits, these privileges. And if not, you will lose the privileges, you will lose these benefits. And if your child is stubborn and he chooses not to do homework or a chore at home, that means that you did not provide enough of a consequence. You have to make it worth it for him to listen to you and to do his homework or anything else that you demand. And you have to learn about what your child likes. And again, try not to have direct fight with your child. Don't say, I demand you must do homework. If you don't do homework, you're not getting. Because if you go head on, you're activating their Yetzer Hara, you're activating their ego to work against you. Rather, it should be a soft approach. I have these privileges to offer you. I have these benefits to provide you with. You will get them once this is done. Or you will not. If you choose to, that's fine. It's your choice. We have to be smart. And this is a rule for all communication. Don't go head on. Work with people, not against them. So again, experience shows that no matter how stubborn the child is, given enough of a consequence, they will eventually realize that it's worth it for them. For example, to take this further, what if they actually don't do the homework? And they don't do it 1 month after another month, after another month. And the time comes for their report card. And they get all poor marks. Then you can take it one step further and you can say, you know what? Your homework is your job. You choose if you want to do homework or not. The consequence, you're gonna fail the course, the year, but I upgrade my consequence. And that is, if your next report card will also be as poor as now, then I will have to limit your privileges even further. And therefore, you can, whatever the child wants, whether it is going, but again, whatever privilege you want to take away, you have to be able to afford it. For example, you can say, I would like you to go to a nice camp this summer. I would like you to go to a camp that you want to go to, the camp that you have been asking me for. If you improve your grades, you will go to that camp. If not, I'm going to send you to the camp that I want, or you'll stay home. But again, here, any demand you make, you have to be able to afford child not listening. And if the child comes back with the same poor report card, you have to be ready to keep him at home. If you can afford that, if you're able to do that, then make such a demand. If you cannot afford to do that, then don't make it part of a demand. Don't threaten a child if you cannot follow through with the consequence. So here, if the child says, I'm not doing my homework, fine. If they don't understand, okay, maybe they're not mature enough to understand that they're going to stay for the next year, but then help them to make it more real. For example, you can only go to camp with B's, A's, whatever you feel your child is capable of. Don't demand more than the child is capable of. Or if it's not camp, you might say you can only have the phone after you bring a better report card next time. So for next 3 months, I'm going to have your phone And if they are addicted to their phone, it's going to be terrible tragedy for them. And you will cause their Yetzer Hara to work for you. They will say, I want my phone. I want my fun. Let me do better. Because 3 months without phone is going to be torture. And if after that, my report card is poor, I'm going to lose the phone, not only for the school year, but also for the whole summer. That I cannot manage. Again, if your child has a phone, you can use it for your benefit. And if your child doesn't have a phone, good for him. Find something else that is important in their life. And if they don't have anything important in their life, you have to introduce something important in their life. It's very important that the child has something to live for, a goal, a dream. Create a dream for them. And then you can use that dream as a consequence. Now, another point. It's very important for parents not to do their household chores by themselves, to create a feeling that they are a team with their children. And once they do it, they will be able to make demands on the child to help around the house. The child should understand that a family is a unit. We are all together. It's not that the parents are the workers and children are just chilling. And when the parents demand something from the children, they're asking children for the parents' benefit. Really, it's the parents' job. And just because they want to relax, they're putting their responsibility on the poor child. That shouldn't be the attitude of the child. The attitude of the child should be that we are one team and I have responsibilities. Now, one important idea before we continue. Very important to understand that when we discipline our child, we're not doing it for ourselves. We're not doing it to make our life easier or to show off our children in front of our relatives or neighbors. Look how obedient my children are. The reason why we're disciplining our children is for their benefit. As a continuation of last week's idea that self-respect and self-esteem are very important. And it's not possible to create self-esteem without the child having responsibilities and successfully fulfilling them. And it's not possible to create self-esteem if the child does not have limitations, if he does not have borders. Research shows that children that grow up in families that don't have structure, that don't have set rules and regulations, are insecure. They don't feel safe because they don't know the safe borders. They don't know what is permitted and what is forbidden. If there is no structure, they will be scared of the world, even though they might be bossy in their house and they're demanding this and that, and the parents let them do whatever they want, but inside of them, they don't have the walls that they can lean on, and they know that these walls are immovable. By setting the rules and following them and not bending them, you provide security for your children. They know that the way the world functions is you have rules and regulations, and that will help them in their work, it will help them in school, it will help them in their family. With interpersonal relationships, they will understand that certain things are permitted and certain things are unacceptable. So we have to understand that when we make demands on our children, it's for their sake, for their benefit. And that will help us sometimes to be more strict, sometimes to be more strong ourselves and not to bend. If we know that by being firm, we're helping our children, we will be stronger and not give in into their cries and their demands. Because we know, yes, the child might be crying now, but really I'm building his self-esteem. I'm building his security wall. And therefore I'm going to be tough. Not cruel, but firm and tough in my own rules. So that's important to keep in mind. For those of us who are soft, and we might say, the child is crying, it's difficult. No, I am helping the child. I'm providing him with security. He's not going to come to you and say, I have scary dreams, if he knows that there are rules and regulations. So coming back to our example of giving your children jobs around the house. It's very important to make the child feel that he is a partner in the house. From the young age, people often ask, from what age can I discipline my child? And the answer is, from the moment they are born. Even an infant. Even an infant, you can already educate. For example, experts say that when a baby cries, don't run to him immediately. You can be on the lookout, check if it's safe, but if you see it's safe, wait a few seconds. Because if you run right away, you're teaching your child impatience. And you are teaching them that their demands must be met immediately. Otherwise, it's dangerous. That's the feeling they get. If I cry and my mother runs, must be what I cried about was dangerous. But if I cry and my mother looks at me and she says, I'm going to come to you in a moment, and she continues doing what she's doing, then I get a feeling that it's not so bad. It's not dangerous. And then slowly the mother comes and says, how are you? Let me help you. And children will understand it even from infancy. And also important during their bedtime. When you're putting your child to sleep, even the newborn, it's important to keep a schedule and not worry, or they're not sleeping, or they're crying, or this and that. When you create schedule for them, they will sleep better and they will grow up with more resilience. So from young age, you can already discipline your children. Now, for us, when your child is already a year and a half, 2 years old, you can already ask them to help you around the house. What can a year and a half do? What can a 2-year-old do? For example, if you have a newborn baby and you have a 2-year-old, so you can hold the pacifier or a bottle in the mouth of a newborn, and you can sit down the 2-year-old and you can say, okay, now you help mommy or help Abba to feed the baby. And they will hold the bottle because they want to. But that's the trick. You give them a job that they want to do first, and then you praise them for it. You tell them, oh, very nice. You are mommy's helper. You are also taking care of the baby. You make them proud. And you ask them, can you please bring the diaper? And they will happily bring the diaper. And you say, thank you. You are helping me to change the baby's diaper. Or you can tell them, stand here and rock the carriage or the crib. And they will happily rock the crib or the carriage. As they grow, you tell them to do more things. And again, depending on their understanding and their ability, you give them small tasks and you praise them. And you tell them, you are my partner. You are helping mommy, you're helping Abba to take care of the house, to clean the house. You give them small chores. At the young age, they will be happy to assist. And you have to give them praise, encouragement. Now, some questions were sent. Let me quickly look at these questions. Good questions are being asked. One is about bedtime. Another is if the child is very stubborn and does not allow the parent to enforce the rules. So let me address the second question first. As I said at the beginning, we must understand that we are the parents, and therefore we are the authority in the house. The first rule is that you yourself have to know it, that you are the one setting the rules. You are the boss in the house. You are the parent. And therefore your demeanor, your speech has to reflect it. It's a mistake to express your demand in a begging way or in a question. For example, you cannot say to your child, eat your cereal. Now, for example, now it's time to eat your cereal. Okay. You don't have to ask for your child's permission to give him a demand. You don't say, okay, or you don't say, do you want? If you need the child to do something, you don't ask them, do you want? You don't ask them, okay. Make sure you don't end your sentences with okay question. You have to make the voice of authority. You have to convince yourself, right now, I'm going to ask my child to do something, and I expect him to listen. If you have a doubt in your own mind that he will not listen, if you're afraid of the child and of his tantrum, he will feel it and he will not listen. You have to say, before you approach the child, you have to say, I am the authority. I have God-given permission to educate my child. God gave this child to me, and I have to set rules for his benefit. You come to the child and say, now it's time for bed. And he ignores, he continues playing on his phone or with his toy. You calmly take the child and you lead him to the room. And without screaming, without yelling or hitting, you say calmly, you repeat yourself. Repetition is the best tool in your repertoire, in your toolbox. If a child doesn't listen, sometimes it means They didn't hear because they're so involved in their game. They didn't hear. They're not doing it on purpose. They just didn't hear. Or they think you're not serious. If they have experience that you say something and they don't follow through, they're not going to listen to you. So you have to come to them and with authority say, it's time for bed. And you take them and you gently lead them to their room. Or you take their toy and you hide it, put it away. And if they cry and they yell and they throw tantrum, you stay calm and you say, it's time for bed. This is an example of something you cannot do yourself. For example, we said if they clean their room, they receive dessert earlier. If not, not. But then you do the cleaning yourself. But in this example, you cannot go to sleep for them. So this is an example where you have to insist, be firm that they go to sleep. Now, whether they fall asleep or not is not up to you. You cannot control that. But at least that they should be in their room with lights out is in your control. And you do it by repetition and by gentle leading to the room, not screaming. And you can add consequences. For example, you can say, tomorrow we're going on a trip. And only those who go to sleep by a certain time will be able to go. And you, again, have to be willing to afford their denial. Meaning, if they drag it on and they go to sleep late, you have to be willing to change your plans and not to go on a trip tomorrow. This will serve them as a great lesson. Again, the goal of parenting is not immediate right now, it's long term. To teach them that you want their own well-being, their benefit. You want to take them on a trip. The only thing is that there is a rule that needs to happen first. They need to go to sleep on time. And the next day they don't go to sleep, you say again, with authority, it's time to go to sleep. You take away their toys. You lead them to their room. And if necessary, you provide another consequence. Tomorrow, we're going to have a special lunch. For example, we'll order pizza or whatever they like. Or we'll have a special dessert. I'm going to get ice cream, but only for those who go to sleep at their appropriate time. And if he chooses not to, again, he's going to lose. But the point is that eventually he will learn that it's worth it for him to listen to parents. And you need a little bit of creativity and imagination to figure out what is it that your children like, what is important in their life, and you provide it as a consequence for their listening to help them along, and as something that they will lose if they don't listen. So again, make sure you don't focus on right now. Will the child do the homework now or not? What's important is long term. Every time he doesn't do the homework, he misses out on something. And that's okay if he doesn't do the homework that day. Every time he doesn't go to sleep on time, that's okay. But then he misses out on something. And if he wants to miss out on a lot of things, too bad for him and good for you. You'll save yourself a lot of money. He asks you to buy this and that and this and that. And you say, sure, I'm happy to buy it for you. Just go to sleep on time for a week, for a month, and you'll get it. And again, you have to be consistent. So again, view discipline as a long-term process, long-term goal. Don't demand immediate obedience, because that will break your child, or it will create fighting and anger. No, you don't want to go to sleep? Okay, you have to be in your room and no toys. And there is a consequence for tomorrow. Don't worry if the child is going to go to sleep late. It's not going to kill him. Don't worry if he doesn't eat the food that you prepared. Let him go hungry. That's okay. 1 or 2, 5, 10 times. That's okay. If he learns consistency, that there is no other option, he'll accept the food that you cook. Now, let me just look over the chat. Okay. If you have children of different ages, of course, you have to concentrate on one child at a time. It will not be successful if you're telling one child to go to sleep and at the same time you cannot enforce it and you running another way to take care of another child. If you have rules and regulations set in place already and the child knows that I will miss out on a privilege tomorrow, so that may be enough. Maybe you can quickly take away the toy and tell the child to go, and that tomorrow he has a certain benefit or consequence. If he doesn't, then it's not your concern. You can take care of your other children. But if your children need you and the child is not capable of going to bed by himself, so then don't waste time demanding it. First, take care of the baby's diaper. First, take care of a crying baby. Take care of your spouse. And then when you, on your own schedule, have the time and ability, go and take care of that child. Again, it's a long-term process. If you are not ready, so postpone it. Now, a question was asked, if I give a certain privilege to one child, wouldn't other children be resentful? So, of course, don't isolate one child and give ice cream only to him or take him alone on a trip. Provide a trip for the whole family. But if somebody doesn't follow rules, either he will be sent to his grandmother or he'll stay home with a babysitter. He will not be able to participate, or the whole family will not go on a trip. So if he follows the rule, the whole family will go on a trip. Not only he will go on a trip, not only he will get pizza, the whole family will get pizza. He might miss out on it. And let's say you make a general rule. If everyone goes to sleep on time, we as a family will have pizza tomorrow. And if not, the whole family will not. That's also okay. Because sometimes children need encouragement from each other. If the sibling will come to your child and say, please go to sleep on time, or even in harsher words, why should we suffer because you don't want to go to sleep on time? And they might start a small fight. That will be for your benefit, because now your other children are putting additional pressure on your child. You have to, of course, be on the lookout that there shouldn't be bullying, but extra help from your other children will only help. Okay. Now, somebody asked what book I'm using. I recommended at the beginning of this talk 2 books. One is Planting and Building by Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, and the second book, just translated into English from Hebrew, by Rabbi Yechiel Yaakovson, Spare the Child. Both should be available in your local Judaica store or online. Now, another point, it's important for parents not to underestimate their children's abilities. Our children are very capable, and we can give them chores, we can give them jobs to do. We can allow them to take care of younger siblings, to dress younger siblings, to feed younger siblings. We can give them chores to sweep the floor, wash the floor, even wash the bathrooms if you want, with gloves, of course. We can ask them to throw out garbage, to change garbage bag. I mean, the chores are endless. And almost every child of every age is capable to do it. Of course, the older the child, the more you can ask of them. And as we said at the beginning, do not make unreasonable demands on your child. But many parents treat their children as children when they can already be treated as young adults. They speak to them in a childish way, and they don't demand anything because they feel he's just a child, he's a baby, he cannot do anything. No, from young age, give them jobs. From young age, ask them for help, and give them reward, give them praise, and again, consequence. An important question was asked: how do you work on yourself? And this is a very big topic, but briefly, working on yourself means identifying your character traits and noticing where you need improvement, and then doing something about it. For example, if a parent knows that they are weak in bitachon, trusting Hashem, they worry too much. So then they have to find lectures or books and actually invest their time in learning it. If a parent knows that they are very quick to anger, so they have to acquire books, go to lectures or listen to lectures, get a partner and learn about anger. If necessary, take therapy. If they know that they're impatient, they have to learn books about patience. A good book about it is Patience by Rabbi Zelik Pliskin. And they have to constantly work on it. It's not easy, and you might say it's easier just to scream and yell. It's easier to get angry than to work on it. It's easier to be impatient than to be patient. But in the long term, your life will be more peaceful, your life will be more healthy, you're less likely to die from cardiac arrest, or from other diseases when you are calm. Your family will be more peaceful, your children will be better, your spouse will be happier. So it's worth it on many fronts to work on your character traits. But this is not the topic of today, so I briefly just mentioned it. Now, Rabbi Wolbe points out that children of this generation are not as strong as children of previous generation. Why? Because they do not witness what children of early generations witnessed. For example, in the earlier generations, it was acceptable for parents to hit their children, and it was acceptable for teachers to hit the children. And at that time, it was okay to use hitting in the classroom or in home as a disciplinary tool. However, nowadays, since not only it's not done, but it's also not legal, it is not recommended to incorporate it into your routine. Similarly, putting fear into a child is not good for their emotional well-being, and as I mentioned, it's not good for the warmth in the house. And one point about threats: the difference between threats and the consequence is that threats are usually unfounded, unbased. They're not based on reality. Consequence is something that's going to happen naturally. Consequence is something you can afford. It's not going to harm negatively the child, as opposed to threats. A lot of times they're empty. The parent is hoping that the child will be so scared of the threat that they will obey. And the parent is wishing that the child will not disobey, because if the child will disobey, the parent is not strong enough to follow through. So it's an empty threat. Most of the time, parents regret making that threat. And then either they back down, which is not healthy, or they enforce it and they become harsh and cruel, which is even worse. So threats and fear are forbidden. Consequences are not cruel. Consequences are not damaging to the child. Consequences use things in child's life that he can live without, something that he really wants, but he can live without. Whereas threats and putting fear into the child touches on things that are essential to his well-being, and they can actually damage. So threats, fear is not allowed. What do I mean by fear? In Russia, for example, people used to say, if you don't do it, Babaika will come and he will take you away, which means like a devil will come and he'll take you away. That's number one, is an empty threat. And number two, it's putting imaginary fear into your child's mind that is forbidden. Do not say a fairy or a demon or chas v'shalom, something else is going to come and punish you. Not only it's false, but also it's going to put fear into the child's mind that even in adulthood he will not be able to get rid of. So the consequence has to be something that he understands, something that is not essential, but something he wants, but can live without, but that he really wants. So what we learned today is that the parent is the authority in the house, not the child. That the parent is given permission by God himself to raise the child. The parent must become the boss. The parent must use his authority, and his voice has to express his authority. The parent should utilize child's yetzer hara, his evil inclination, to help the process of education. And we learned about the trick. Don't say, do this or else, but rather say, I will give you this benefit as soon as this is done. We learned that children can understand from young age rules and regulations, and we have to start teaching them from young age what is appropriate and what is not. We learned certain things that we cannot tolerate, and that is lying, stealing, and hitting a parent. These three things must be stopped immediately. And for these three things, it's even permissible to give a light slap and to show the child and to tell the child that this behavior will not be tolerated. We learn that anything that the child will grow out of naturally, you can leave it alone and don't rebuke the child. We learned about creating warmth in the relationship between parents and children, and that warmth will help children to survive adolescence. We learned about making children partners in the family, making them feel that the family is a team, a unit, and therefore any job that you ask of them to do is not you just not wanting to do your responsibility, but rather it's their part in functioning of running of the family. We learned that having discipline, rules and regulations is healthy for child self-esteem. And we gave some examples of proper consequences. At this time, I want to open the floor if anybody wants to ask questions on this topic. And I want to thank everyone for participating. May we all have healthy children and have long life ourselves to be able to enjoy our family together. Let me just check one more time the chat.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Just ask questions like that.
Yeah, my question is, let's say you tell a child, well, you know, you give them a threat. You tell them that you're gonna take a toy away or something, and they actually battle you. Like they grab it from you. It becomes like a physical thing. So, or
Yes.
what do you do?
So, as I said earlier, that one of the three big no-nos is for a child to hit the parent. So you have to explain to him firmly, we do not hit parents. And you take away the toy. And if he battles, you can temporarily release your hold. And as soon as he goes back to playing, you just either turn off the light, or then you calmly come over and take the toy again. Again, it's not immediate right now who wins. If you don't want to let go, it's your problem. There's going to be a consequence. And the consequence can be the next day, it can be in a week from now. As long as the child will be reminded, you know why I'm not taking you to a store to buy your toy? It's because a week ago, I told you it's bedtime, and I took away the toy, and you grabbed it and you hit your parent. That's unacceptable. Therefore, we cannot go to
But
the store.
they're not hitting you, but they're actually suddenly grabbing and like they're grabbing and
Yes.
running.
So
You put it on a higher shelf and they run and they get a chair to reach for
yes,
that.
yes. You being an adult, you will win because you're smarter. You have other options. For example, you can turn the light off. And again, you can repeat yourself. Children need repetition, firm repetition. Not nagging, when you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, but firm. Now it's time for bed. Now we put away our toys. And again, you come, you take the toy, you put it back on the shelf. And you turn the light, you say, let's go. And they run away, they turn the light on, they grab the toy and they start playing. Again, you calmly come into the room. Now it's time for bed. Now we put away our toys. You take the toy, you put again, and again the process repeats. They have to understand that when my mommy said that it's time for bed, it's really time for bed. My grabbing the toy is not going to help me. And even if I do, a moment later, my mommy is going to come and take it away again and turn the light off, and she's going to repeat herself again. So it's not going to help. And the next day, as soon as you say, it's time for bed, let's put away toys, and you take the toy, they're not going to resist anymore because they know it doesn't pay to fight. My mother is more stubborn than I am. My mother is smarter than I am. My mother is more insistent than I am. She's more capable. So don't be afraid of your children. Now, someone is asking, do I say the word we are partners? That's okay. You can tell them, I am the parent. I am the boss number one, the father, the mother. Then you have the older brother. You are the next partner. You're number three. And you have to take care. The older you are, the more responsibility you have and the more authority you have. We as parents, we have the greatest responsibility. We work, we shop, we cook, we clean. You, as an oldest child, you're the next in responsibility and at the same time in authority. If a parent is not available, you can teach your younger siblings. And we will give you some privileges. You will go to sleep a little bit later than your younger sibling. You might have more dessert because you are bigger in age and size. So you tell them that they are a partner, but not an equal partner. You are number one. Your child is next in line. And the next question is asked, again, the age, and we spoke about it, at the youngest age possible, as soon as they're born, which means you don't demand from them, but you train them by showing them that you know what's good for them. And the example I gave was that when a young child cries, you come to him and with calmness, you look over and you say, it's okay, it's not dangerous, I will come back in a minute. And you come back and then you take care of them. So again, even without words, they get a feeling that my mother knows what she's doing and I can trust her, as opposed to a parent running and saying, oi, my baby, oi, oi, oi. Then they think to themselves that it's dangerous, and they think that the mother is not capable of taking care of them, and therefore the mother is not to be trusted. So from young age. Now somebody asked the next question, what if a child throws tantrum or he threatens to throw things on the floor if you don't let them have their way? So that's easy. All you have to do is nothing. You just continue doing what you said is going to happen. If you say no more toy and you take away the toy and the child says, no, give me back my toy or I'm going to throw all these toys down, you say, fine, you're not going to get the toy anyway. It's time now to go to sleep. We put away our toys. If you make a mess, I cannot stop you, but it's going to be your responsibility to clean it up. Which means you cannot lose your cool. You cannot fall for their threats. And they will throw a tantrum and they will throw things in anger. You cannot change your demands. You cannot give in. Again, no child as yet died from a tantrum or from crying. Don't be scared. And so what if he throws something on the floor? It's going to be his responsibility. And if he's still young enough that he cannot clean up after himself, fine, you'll clean up after himself. But the lesson here is not that if he throws something, he'll have to clean up. The lesson here is that you are the boss. That if you made a rule, even if he threatens you, you don't back down. The rule is a rule. Time for bed, we put away toys. We go to our room. We turn off the light. And even if he throws and makes a hole in the wall, doesn't matter. That's a separate lesson. That's a separate consequence that he'll have to pay for the next day or in a few days when he'll ask for something in a store. You'll remind him, oh, you made a hole in the wall. Oh, you threw food on the floor. That costs money. So I would like to buy you a toy, but we'll use that money to fix the damage. And let's just take one last question for today. Many good questions. We don't have time for all of them now. But let me address one that may be the most necessary at this point. But of course, all the questions that were asked are important and they need to be addressed. But the question was asked, what if I don't know what consequence to give at this moment? The child disobeyed, and I don't have the consequence in mind. It is okay to postpone the consequence. Meaning, for two reasons. Number one is children have good memory. And even a few hours later or a few days later, you can remind them and tell them that this consequence is for that. So you have time. You don't have to give the consequence and punish them right away. No, take your time, calm down. Don't send threats. If you do this, that. It's okay to say, this is your job. This is what you have to do. If you don't do it, there will be a consequence. What the consequence will be, I have to decide. But don't worry, there will be a consequence. And that will give you enough time to think of a consequence, to speak it over with your spouse, or ask advice from a mentor. And it will also, in some cases, help your child, because sometimes when you give a direct consequence, then the child starts debating, is it worth it for me or not? And he might say, you know what, I'm willing to take the consequence. And he will not listen. But if you keep it vague, sometimes it will put additional pressure on the child because the child doesn't know what the consequence is going to be. So he will be extra scared, but maybe they're going to take away this, or maybe they're going to take away that. So it's okay to tell the child that you will think of the consequence later. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining and for learning together. I advise you to get those books. I recommend you to continue learning about it. Parenting is very important topic. Our children are given into our care, and therefore we have to do a good job with them. So continue this education. Bezat Hashem, we should have more classes like this. And Bezat Hashem, we should all be reaping benefits, reaping pleasure from our hard work. May we see our children grow to be successful adults, good Jewish people who serve Hashem with happiness. Amen. Have a good night. Shabbat Shalom to everyone.